Okay, there's levels to this. Got it. When you put the two drawings next to each other, the difference in skill is obvious. From the shading to the textures, it resembles that of a pro. And it was at this very moment that for the first time, Fujino's art is seen as just to this. Got it. When you put the two drawings next to each other, the difference in skill is obvious. From the shading to the textures, it resembles that of a pro. And it was at this very moment that for the first time, Fujino's art is seen as just this. Got it. When you put the two drawings next to each other, the difference in skill is obvious. From the shading to the textures, it resembles that of a pro. And it was at this very moment that for the first time, ordinary. So what does she do now? She practices day and night. Weeks turns into months. Months turns into years. And we watch her burn through sketches, books, anatomy, and watch her sacrifice time with her friends and family, all so that she could get better. She's now a 6th grader, and just like before, the weekly paper is out. And in that paper, there's, yet again, a clear difference in skill. Despite the effort she's put in, it just wasn't enough. So, she decides to quit. From here on, the story shows a different side of Fujino's life. Up to this point, her days has been entirely consumed by art, but now she's exploring a more social life, hanging out with friends, going to karate with her sister, and watching movies with her family. But throughout this entire time, there's like a void in her eyes, like there's no thought or life behind them at all. Graduation arrived and she started a new chapter in her life. Before she could leave, her teacher called her into his office again, but this time for a different reason. Kiyomoto never arrived to pick up her diploma, so he tasked Fujino to take her to her house. She rings the doorbell, but there's no response. The door is unlocked, but all the lights is off. There's a noise in the background, hinting there's someone home. She turns the corner and she's met with stacks upon stacks of sketchbooks. Before she could leave, she noticed a strip of paper, and despite her not drawing for years, this singular paper pulls her in, demanding her to draw. So she does exactly that. Until having noticed what happened, she runs out of the house in a panic, to escape only to be followed. The girl who followed her is Kiyomoto, and it's revealed she has been a massive fan of Fujino for the longest of time. She read every weekly manga strip that came out and looked forward to each new release, but noticed her manga no longer appeared on a weekly paper. So she asked Fujino one simple question. Why did you stop drawing manga? To which her response ended up being,
ていうか今漫画の賞に出す話考えてて、ステップアップするためにやめたって感じだけど。
which is an obvious lie. The scenes that follow is a quiet eruption, a glimpse to someone who's always wanted to draw, yet held herself back, convinced she could never be good enough. Each moment builds like pressure beneath the surface, years of frustration and longing collapsing all at once, until she finally breaks. She sprints home through the rain, bursts into her room without even stopping to dry off, and for the first time in years, she begins to draw again. Look Back initially seems like a story about Fujino and her difficult journey with art, but it soon becomes a tale of two girls, their lives, their bond, and how they come together to create a manga, while quietly exploring a few deeper themes along the way. Near the end, tragedy shatters everything, turning the story into something far deeper than it first appeared. But I'll leave that for you to experience yourself, since this video's focus isn't on that particular part of the story. Fujino's story is a quiet tragedy about ambition, guilt, and the painful beauty of growth. At first, she's a symbol of confidence, the kind of young artist who believes talent alone defines worth. But everything changes the moment she meets Kiyomoto. Throughout the film, we watch her shed versions after versions of herself, chasing something she can't quite put a name to. When her ego cracks, what seeps through isn't weakness, but it's truth. Envy feeds into admiration, rivalry into connection, and through that, she rediscovers what it means to create again. By the end, Fujino isn't the same girl we met at the start. She's someone reborn through the act of breaking, someone who faced emptiness without flinching, and rebuilt herself not as who she once was, but as who she became. That's the art of breaking yourself, to lose, to grieve, to rebuild, and to realize that the cracks were never a flaw. Many stories over the years have told a similar tale. Works like Blue Period, Breaking Bad, Whiplash, The Climber, all explore a similar truth, the art of shedding your old self to emerge stronger, wiser, and more whole. They remind us that transformation is rarely easy, and that growth often comes through struggle and persistence. These type of stories always resonate with me. They feel the most relatable and inspiring because I can see the same passion, same struggle, the same drive reflected in the characters. As you can probably tell, I watched Look Back very recently. I'm a bit late, but the themes in this story really got me thinking about other works that explore a similar idea. So today, I'm going to talk about some other stories that dive into the art of breaking yourself. Vinland Saga is a manga turned anime about a kid seeking revenge on his father's killer. The story covers a plethora of themes, from political violence to human struggle, slavery, growth, atonement, and many, many more. At its core, it explores the destructive cycle of revenge, showing how obsession and hatred can consume a person, shaping their identity around violence. Beyond revenge, Vinland Saga delves into forgiveness, redemption, and a deeper meaning of strength. Thorfinn, the main character, embodies the art of breaking oneself. His innocence, ego, and moral compass are shattered through trauma, forcing him to confront the emptiness within. Throughout the entirety of the first season, we watch him develop into this young innocent kid, into a ruthless killer. Having witnessed his father's death right in front of him showed him just how violent the world really is. And in this moment, he made it his personal life mission to be the one to end his father's killer's life. To do that, he joined Askeladd's band of mercenaries with guaranteed opportunities to have a 1v1 had he achieved something grand in a battle. The story skips from when he was a kid to a teenager, all the way to when he becomes an adult. Under Askeladd, he hones his skills as a warrior, enduring brutal battles, and is exposed to the lowest form of humanity. Initially, Thorfinn is driven by raw anger and obsession, seeing every fight as a step towards retribution. Yet, over time, his experiences alongside Askeladd exposes him to complexity, strategy, and even an unexpected mentorship. He begins to understand the nuances of leadership. Despite this growth, his path is still defined by hatred, and he remains trapped in a cycle of violence. The moment Askeladd dies marks the apex of this transformation. Thorfinn's long-held purpose vanishes, leaving him empty and directionless. It's here at the crossroads that Thorfinn's old self finally breaks. His vengeance fulfilled, yet his soul hollow, leaving only the fragments of who he once was. And from those fragments begins the slow, painful process of introspection, reflection, and ultimately the rebuilding of a new identity. One not forged by hate, but by understanding his past sins and choosing a life where he has no enemies.
Because I have no enemies.
When you hear the name Takehiko Inoue, the first thing that comes to mind for most are his works on Vagabond and Slam Dunk. Which makes sense, those two are really good manga. But one series that often is left out is his manga titled Real. Real is a manga that centers around three protagonists, each whose lives has been profoundly shaped by two things: physical disabilities and basketball. As their paths unfold, each of them faces the devastating, life-altering event that shatters their sense of self. What follows isn't just recovery, but a deeply human journey of growth, of learning to live, and to find meaning again in the aftermath of loss. The concept of breaking yourself takes on its most human form in this story. The manga doesn't glorify pain or redemption. It lives in the quiet, messy spaces between them. Every page feels heavy with regret, longing, and the ache of trying to move forward when life has already taken so much. Nomiya was once a promising athlete, yet a single mistake led him into an accident that paralyzes an innocent girl, leaving him with guilt that festers for years. He quits school, isolates himself, and drifts through life haunted by a past he can't undo. But beneath this self-loathing, there's something deeply human, the desperate desire to be forgiven, even when you can't forgive yourself. His story isn't about redemption through success, but through acceptance. He breaks himself not through ambition, but through remorse. And it's in that pain that he begins to understand compassion and tries to live a life seeking to be a better person. Togawa, on the other hand, represents another kind of breaking, the loss of identity. Once a runner, his leg is amputated due to an illness, stripping him from the one thing that defined him. His response isn't peaceful, but is instead filled with rage. He channels every ounce of pride and bitterness into wheelchair basketball, obsessing over competition, as if victory could make him whole again. But as the story unfolds, his ignorance and anger begins to crack. Beneath the facade of control lies the fear of being ordinary, of never being enough again. Then there's Takashi, a once golden boy now confined to a wheelchair. His life, once built on talent and popularity, collapsed in an instant. His journey through rehabilitation mirrors a psychological descent, the grief of losing your body, your status, and your sense of purpose. But it's through that grief that he learns something profound, that worth isn't tied to ability or appearance. His struggle becomes an exploration of dignity. For me, Real stands as Inoue's most powerful and personal work, a story I constantly find myself returning to, even long after finishing it. Having played sports for much of my life, and still doing so occasionally today, I can deeply relate to the same passion, discipline, and quiet desperation that drives its characters forward. It's the story about redemption and transformation, told through the perspective of three individuals, each fighting their own battles, yet all striving for the same sense of purpose. What makes Real so captivating is how it shines a light on people often overlooked in fiction, those living with disabilities. In a medium where strength is usually shown through power or perfection, Real flips that idea on its head. It challenges the common misconceptions that disabled people are limited or helpless, instead portraying them as the ones with the deepest resolve, the strongest spirit, and the most unshakable will to keep moving forward. Attack on Titan is probably one of the most popular known animes today. Many of you seen or read the manga, so there's no need for me to go too in deep into this. Instead, let's just focus on a specific character that fits the concept of this video. Honestly, there's a lot to choose from. You got Eren, Levi, Erwin, Historia, and many more. But for today's video, I'll do a little twist and focus on Reiner.
Reiner, やるんだ。今ここで。勝負は今ここで決める。
Reiner's arc revolves around an intense internal duality. He was trained from childhood as a warrior candidate for Marley, instilled with a sense of duty to infiltrate Paradise Island and commit acts that would ensure his people's survival. But once he becomes embedded among the scouts, living among the very people he's been sent to kill, he experiences a profound split. One identity as a loyal soldier of Marley, and another as a friend and comrade to those he is meant to betray. This split creates a deep psychological breaking. Unlike physical trauma, Reiner's pain is sustained and invisible. He develops dissociative tendencies. At times, he addresses one persona as if the other isn't present, a clear coping mechanism for the unbearable tension between duty and consciousness. He carries the lives of his people on his shoulder, the expectations of Marley, and the consequences of every kill. Each act of violence further corrodes his identity, but he cannot escape it. Reiner's body is strong, but his identity is under siege, showing that breaking isn't just physical or external. It can be a slow, grinding process of moral, ethical, and emotional conflict. While some characters break in order to rebuild and find a new identity, Reiner breaks under external expectations and moral conflict, showing the psychological toll of living in a state of enforced duality. Breaking yourself isn't always about physical loss or trauma. Sometimes it's the internalized burden of being forced to live a life that contradicts your true self. His arc is tragic yet super realistic. He's one of the most interesting written characters in all of Attack on Titan, and I find his character dichotomy to be really fascinating compared to most of the other cast. Breaking yourself isn't about destruction for its own sake. It's about facing the parts of yourself you've ignored, shattered, or denied, whether through loss, ambition, guilt, trauma, or physical limitation. It's painful, it's messy, and it's often lonely, but it's also where growth, understanding, and true strength are born. From Fujino's quiet heartbreak and look back, to Thorfinn's journey from vengeance to peace, to Reiner's endless internal struggles in Attack on Titan, to Nomiya, Togawa, and Takashi confronting their own bodies and limitations in real. These stories show us that breaking isn't the end. It's a threshold, a space where the old self dies and the new self begins to emerge. So next time you feel lost, overwhelmed, or broken, remember this. It's in those cracks that your story begins to take shape. That poignant stillness is what remains. And in that stillness, you find the quiet art of becoming whole again.
Thank you all for gathering here today. Here lies, let's just call him Johnny. He was born and raised in a small town in Connecticut. He enjoyed Taco Tuesday and going to baseball games in his hometown. His biggest personal achievement was getting 20 likes on a comment. He also enjoyed other hobbies like sports betting and scrolling on TikTok. Turns out he clocked in over 9 years just on that app, just swiping. Anyways, he never actually left a 50-mile radius of his hometown, never got to see Paris like he always wanted to. The book he's been working on for the past 37 years is only 5 pages done, and another word would never be added to it. He also always wanted to open up his own brewery, but, that dream died long before he did. Yeah, he lived 62 years, but really died at 25. He went through his entire life in silent fear and crippling self-doubt, never experiencing what his life could have been if he just didn't stop himself. He always put off his dreams for tomorrow, forgetting that he won't always have a tomorrow. I wonder what he thinks now. I wonder what he would do if he had one more try, one more day. I wonder if before going into the ground, he knew his biggest fear was about to come true. Not spiders, not heights, not even death itself, but the final realization that his entire life was nothing. But mediocre is one of those words that means something a little different depending on who you ask. The actual definition of mediocre is of only moderate quality, which is average, right in the middle, center of the bell curve. Like not good, not bad, just meh. Which on its own doesn't sound terrible because all it really means is normal. But how would you feel if someone rated your entire life 5 out of 10? Like just imagine if the best word someone could use to explain your entire existence was mid. If that happened, we would feel as if our life was wasted, at least a little bit. Something about that just feels inherently wrong and empty. Nobody wants to be called mediocre. Even if you were to go around and ask random people, do you want to live a mediocre life? They would immediately say no. Probably hell no. And this fear of living a mediocre, mundane, ordinary, average, doesn't matter what word you want to use, life is the strongest it's ever been and is getting worse. And a lot of us will spend our entire lives trying to get over this fear, but still feel as if we haven't made any progress. We'll take 2 steps forward, but then a goalpost will jump another mile. We'll use up the little time we have trying to break above this line, trying to earn the fact that our lives amounted to something more than just mediocrity. But why? What's wrong with being average? What's the problem with living a simple, normal life? Well, technically there isn't. On its own, there's nothing inherently wrong with living a normal, average life. It's not like if you or someone else lives a mediocre life, you did something wrong and it should have went a different way. By definition, most people throughout all time have lived normal lives, and most of us here come from average people living average lives. We need average people to keep the world running, and without average people, nothing would work. And no matter where, what time period you go to, by definition, there have to be average people. But being average can change drastically based off of a million different variables. Because saying someone lives an average or mediocre life necessitates comparison. For example, if you're the only person alive, you just live the best life ever because you're the only life. If you're one out of two people, then you're either living the best life or the worst life. And then depending on what you're comparing, different people can be mediocre in different ways. Like you can be top 10 in one specific area of life, but then bottom 10 in other areas. Same thing when comparing win. For example, what people call average today is a significantly better average than in the not too distant past. And probably 100 generations from now, average is going to be better than the lives of millionaires today, because that's just what happens as the quality of life goes up over time. Then also, depending on where you are, even today, average can mean something completely different again. If you're in America or another first world country and you're just average, your average is a lot different than other people's average globally. Worldwide, the median household income is around $10,000 a year. The median human on this planet still doesn't have AC. Billions of people still don't have access to consistent clean water. 25,000 human beings die of just hunger every day, with 10,000 of them being children. That's an average of one human dying every 3.5 seconds. Meaning, as you've been watching this video, this many people have died just of hunger. And like, this isn't a go trip or anything, but it sometimes helps me to zoom out and look at my life objectively instead of through the very narrow lens that we tend to do a lot. Anyways, I say all this because we need to have a baseline. Because without going too deep into semantics, because we can do that forever, right now, whenever I'm talking about average or mediocrity, I'm talking about modern first world country idea of mediocre, as this is my experience and what I assume most people watching this video also use as a baseline. And while I do think it's good to appreciate what you have, I still do not think that living a mediocre life is something we should automatically accept and strive towards. Okay, but why is being mediocre so scary? And why is it something we actively try to fight to avoid being? Well, first we can start with the scientific biological reason that we fear being mediocre because it's encoded into our genes. At the end of the day, every cell in your body just wants to survive long enough to survive and thrive. And a huge part of your survival has always been other people, because we need others to help us survive. No one can survive long enough solely by themselves, especially in the past. And that's a huge part of what makes humans human. Our ability and desire to connect, communicate, and collaborate with others. And this giant web of people interacting is called society. And naturally, a part of society is status. But status brings competition and the desire to stand out and be valuable to others so others can help you out, and vice versa. Because if you're not useful to others, or other people don't like you or want to help you, the chances of you surviving will go down significantly. So encoded inside your genes, throughout thousands of generations from people in the past, you would naturally develop this fear of being mediocre, or more specifically low status. So you would take more action to try to move towards the top and become higher status and break out of this mediocre middle ground. Because we all know that even today, we get disproportionate returns depending on where you land on the social hierarchy. If you're at the bottom, you get basically nothing. If you're in the middle, you get some rewards, but not too much. Usually just barely enough to survive and stay sane. If you're higher, you get quite a bit more. But if you're number one, you get basically everything. Just think about today in almost any single area or category. If you're number one, you don't just get some more rewards than other people below you, but you might literally get 10,000 times more reward. Like, you get outsized returns the higher you get, drastically increasing your chances of survival and thriving. Like, think about kings in the past or people in power today. They can't literally do anything, but damn there. The entire world is at their disposal. But now think about someone at the very bottom. Their options for survival and thriving are extremely limited, and they don't have much control over their lives. They have little to no freedom or autonomy to maximize their life. And the people in the middle are just given basically barely enough to survive just to exist and keep going. Now, this can lead to other problems that are going to be talked about in this video, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. It's just simply what happens. And of course, not everyone can be number one, but you're still programmed to at least try, or to find a little area or a pocket to become known, heard, seen, or better than others in something, so you can stand out and live a better life. Because every cell in your body knows there is no advantage in striving to live an average life. Basically, almost everything you do in some way, shape, or form is heavily tied or directly influenced by other people around.
Okay, that was just not it, bro. Okay, let's watch this.
You won't find love by trying harder or by obsessing over someone. Cartoons are full of romance and love stories, but instead of showing you how you can find love,
Okay, already the music, I don't like this. But let's give this a chance.
they show examples of how you push it away, which leaves the question, how do you actually find love? Well, the answer might surprise you, but it has an uncomfortable truth you might not be ready to face yet. But before getting there, it's important to understand what drives it away. Starting with Finn from Adventure Time, because his story shows us the complete evolution of problematic relationship behavior, and why even learning your lesson doesn't guarantee success. Finn spent years obsessing over Princess Bubblegum, a woman who was not only far older than him, but clearly saw him as a type of little brother. But did that stop him? No. Instead, it turned him into the ultimate people pleaser. He would jump at the chance to do anything for her, becoming very protective and jealous when someone else came between them, even pretending to be someone else as a desperate ploy to attract her attention, all because he thought that would make him worthy of love. But there's a cruel part to this. Princess Bubblegum would occasionally kiss him after his heroic duties, as Finn hoped. These little crumbs of affection kept him hooked for years, even though she was never actually romantically interested. But Finn couldn't see past his own fantasy. The lesson here, when someone gives you mixed signals, pay attention to their actions, not the occasional validation. Princess Bubblegum was being kind, not romantic. Finn's mistake was building a relationship in his head that didn't exist in reality. Then Finn found something real. Flame Princess and Finn's relationship works so well because they're always laughing, playing, and generally acting like kids, because they are, and they're actually really compatible. It was everything Finn had wanted with Princess Bubblegum. So naturally, because of his naivete and youth, he destroyed it. When Finn had a dream about Flame Princess fighting Ice King, he decided he needed to make it happen in real life. Why? Because watching her fight turned him on like it did the previous day. He wrote fake letters, used all of her secrets and insecurities against her, even writing fake threats from the Ice King, specifically designed to make her angry enough to seek him out and fight him. He exploited everything she'd shared with him in private, manipulated her emotions, and betrayed her trust, all so he could get his kicks watching her be violent. When she found out, she immediately dumped him, and rightfully so. That's another dark side of love. When you finally get what you want, you're either so afraid of losing it, or you take it for granted that you try to control it. Finn couldn't just enjoy having a girlfriend who he
Bro, that is so fucked up. What?
liked for exactly the way she was. He had to manipulate her into giving him specific, pleasurable experiences. By the time Finn met Huntress Wizard, he'd learned his lesson about manipulation. He's shown to be much more cautious with his feelings and didn't rush to earn Huntress Wizard's affections. It's the first time that he was honest about his feelings, respectful of her boundaries, and didn't try to force anything, or for that matter, even chase it. They connected through music and shared a kiss. But Huntress Wizard feels that she can't pursue a relationship with Finn due to her wizardry commitments. She believes that exceptional beasts like them can't fall in love. And Finn actually respected her opinion instead of trying to convince her otherwise. That's the first uncomfortable truth. Even when Finn did everything the right way, the relationship still didn't work. Their relationship is not that of BF and GF, but more of maybe friends with benefits, and it was ultimately left unresolved. The big takeaways: you can't nice guy your way into love, and you can't manipulate your way into love either, and you definitely cannot even maturely communicate your way into love if the other person is not ready for the relationship with you. Sometimes the problem isn't your approach. Sometimes people just aren't available, emotionally or otherwise, and you have to respect that. Finn's journey shows us that there's no magic formula for finding love. Chasing love sometimes pushes it away, and even emotional maturity doesn't guarantee success. The only constant in all of Finn's failed relationships was Finn himself. But for the solution, we actually have to look further. Take Morty, who actually goes through a very similar arc. But pause there. Think about Morty's situation for a second in contrast to Finn. His grandfather can build him literally anything, take him literally anywhere, and make him into literally anyone. And yet, Morty still could not get Jessica to notice him, all because of one fatal flaw. See if you can spot it in his most infamous moment. It happens when he gets Rick to create a love serum for the school dance.
Maybe make some sort of love potion or something?
There was only one goal here: make Jessica fall in love with him. But the serum worked so well that it made every person on the planet fall in love with him. When Rick tried to fix it, he made it worse. The antidote turned everyone into hideous monsters. They had to abandon that entire universe and move to a completely new one where different versions of themselves had just died, just so they can replace them and have a new place to live. Morty literally destroyed a universe in pursuit of a crush who barely knew he existed. This wasn't a one-time thing either. In the episode Edge of Tomorty, Morty gets a hold of death crystals that show possible future deaths. He sees a version of himself dying peacefully as an old man, with Jessica telling him that she loves him. And convinced that this is his destiny, he becomes obsessed with making this future happen. When Jessica invites him to go skinny dipping with her and her friends, Morty declines, saying, "Let's meet together again in our 40s. He's so focused on his predetermined future that he ignores actual opportunities happening right now. Then comes the worst twist of all. In the post-credits scene, it's revealed that Jessica dreams of working in hospice care, comforting dying strangers by saying, "I love you" to them. So Morty's destiny was just being a random patient in the first place. This pattern continues throughout the series. Morty constantly makes terrible decisions whenever a woman is involved. There's a brutal lesson buried in Morty's story. You can have all of the resources in the world, but if you're operating from a place of neediness and low self-worth, you'll find a way to sabotage yourself every time. That's Morty's fatal flaw. He had access to infinite possibilities, but he was still stuck in the same mental trap. He was convinced that getting Jessica, or another girl, would solve all of his problems, so he kept trying to force it to happen instead of working on himself. All the technology and all of that power didn't make him more confident. The adventures didn't make him more interesting. The literal universe hopping didn't give him perspective, because the problem wasn't external, it was internal. See the real-life parallel there? When you're desperate for validation from someone specific, no amount of external advantages will help you. You'll just find more creative ways to mess it up. And the exact same goes for Timmy Turner. Like, instead of technology, he'll just get wish-granting fairies and do the whole story over again. If you just realized that you might be self-sabotaging, the next character will have the lesson just for you. It's Mordecai from Regular Show, who shows us the most extreme example of what happens when you can't make decisions about relationships. Mordecai had a crush on Margaret, the cute barista at his local coffee shop. After months of building up the courage to ask her out, his friend Rigby decided to prove how easy it was by casually asking her on a date out of spite. She said yes. Mordecai's response? He killed him. Not metaphorically. Rigby literally dies in this episode, all because he asked out Mordecai's crush on a date. Mordecai's jealousy went so far off the charts that he actually ended Rigby's life over a girl who didn't even know his last name. And this is supposed to be the romantic character we're rooting for. Is this the right romance? The episode treats this like a learning moment about jealousy, but the murder was just the beginning of Mordecai's problems. Because obviously, murder was not the end-all be-all. Throughout the series, he develops a pattern of keeping his options open instead of committing to anyone. He'd get close to Margaret, then pull back. He'd start dating CJ, then second-guess himself when Margaret returned. The show portrays this as romantic complexity, and it can be. But what it actually shows is someone who was too selfish to make a choice and commit to someone. Mordecai wanted to keep everyone available to him without having to risk anything himself. Indecision didn't protect him from heartbreak. It guaranteed that he'd hurt everyone involved, including himself. Its peak came when he had to choose at a crossroad. Instead of handling this like an adult, he decided the perfect time and place for this life-changing decision was his friend's wedding. Mid-ceremony, he hijacked the vows to give a rambling speech about his feelings, managed to say absolutely nothing coherent, and lost both women in the process. Mordecai's story teaches us a brutal truth about relationships. Indecision is a decision. By trying to keep his options open, he ended up with none of them. His fear of making the wrong choice meant that he never made any choice at all, besides for not making a choice. He strung people along, avoided difficult conversations, and convinced himself that not deciding was somehow kinder than picking someone. Does that mean that going for a single woman and being more confident is the answer, though? Well, for that we have to look at Brian Griffin and Johnny Bravo. They're similar because they represent two different approaches to the same mindset. Brian thinks he deserves women because he's cultured and intellectual. He constantly dates way out of his league, then acts genuinely shocked when these relationships don't work out. His approach is to position himself as superior to other men. He's the sophisticated writer surrounded by idiots. So obviously women should choose him. I mean, he even chases the wife of his owner. See the chasing pattern not working again here? On top of that, Ryan's intelligence is mostly pretentious posturing. He writes terrible novels, makes pseudo-intellectual observations, and looks down on everyone around him while failing spectacularly at his own basic goals. He feels entitled to success with women because he sees himself as better than other guys, not because he's actually offering anything valuable. Johnny represents the opposite approach, pure confidence and aggression. He never takes no for an answer, believes his own hype despite constant rejection, and even treats dating like a numbers game where persistence will eventually wear someone down. Johnny's problem isn't the lack of confidence, it's the complete lack of self-awareness. He's convinced that he's irresistible while being rejected by literally every woman he encounters. His confidence becomes harassment because he can't process that someone might genuinely not be interested in his bravado. Both characters share the same core delusion. They believe they deserve women's attention. Ryan thinks that his intellect entitles him to success, while Johnny thinks his looks and confidence do. Neither considers that women are actual people with their own preferences who might simply not be interested in what they have to offer. The lesson is that entitlement, disguised as romance, is still entitlement. Whether you're the nice guy who thinks women owe you a chance, or the aggressive pursuer who won't take no for an answer, you're making the same fundamental error, treating women like prizes to be won rather than people to connect with. That leaves us with one last character that actually gets the girl in the end, paired with a real lesson about what is needed to actually find love. And it didn't start off perfectly either. Fry literally spends most of Futurama pursuing Leela through grand gestures and elaborate schemes. Most of them backfired spectacularly. But unlike the others, Fry eventually succeeded. But why? What made him different? It wasn't that he tried harder, it was because he grew as a person. The relationship worked when Fry stopped trying to impress Leela and started actually supporting her as a friend and partner. And that isn't just limited to Fry, too. There are other guys from the exact same shows we mentioned who barely try but somehow always succeed. And that can be frustrating, especially since the main characters are putting so much effort in. Well, it's because they do something differently, something fundamental, which we find continuing with Futurama, where we have Bender. Bender is crude, selfish, and openly terrible, yet he consistently gets date. Why? Well, because he doesn't put anyone on a pedestal. He treats dating casually, doesn't get emotionally or romantically invested in the outcomes, and never bases his self-worth on whether someone likes him. When Bender gets rejected, he shrugs and moves on. When he gets a date, he doesn't act like he won the lottery. This detachment, even though it comes from narcissism rather than healthy confidence, is ironically attractive because it signals that he doesn't need validation from others. But that doesn't mean that you should go around being as toxic as Bender either. Then there's Jake, who has a stable marriage with kids and shows what a secure relationship actually looks like. He doesn't chase other women, doesn't make his worth dependent on romantic success, and doesn't treat his partner like a trophy to be won or controlled. He's proof that the boring approach, being honest, reliable, patient, and emotionally available, actually works better than any of the dramatic tactics we see from the examples of the failures. Lastly, there is someone that makes it work without communicating. He barely speaks, never chases anyone desperately, and focuses on his own interests and projects. And that, of course, is Ferb. In the future timeline, he actually ends up with Vanessa through genuine connection built over time. And this is a huge contrast with his brother Phineas, and it's really telling. While Phineas remains oblivious to Isabella's obvious interest for years, Ferb pays attention to the people around him without making romance the center of his universe. It all leads to an uncomfortable truth. The characters who care the least about getting the girl often seem to succeed, while those who make it their life's mission fail spectacularly. Successful characters all share common traits. They have their own interests, they don't treat rejection as a personal catastrophe, and they see potential partners as people rather than prizes. They're successful because they're emotionally stable enough to form genuine connections. The failure characters teach us what not to do. Don't obsess, don't manipulate, don't make someone else responsible for your happiness. And most of all, don't make your new love interest more important than anything in your life. Let them into your life slowly while supporting your own hobbies and interests. In the end, to actually find love, you need 3 fundamentals. First, have your own life. Next, treat people with respect. Finally, don't make romance the foundation of your net worth. It has to come from inside you. If you're watching cartoon characters for dating advice, I think you're already approaching this the wrong way. Desperation for love repels people because it signals that you don't value yourself as much as someone else's approval. And if you don't value yourself, why should someone else? If you recognize yourself in any of these characters, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Most of us have been really desperate at some point. It's a lonely world out there. Most of us have made someone else the center of our universe. And wondered why it didn't work out. The uncomfortable truth that we can't emphasize enough is that you can't love someone else properly until you're okay being alone and loving yourself. You can't build a healthy relationship from a place of neediness and desperation. And you definitely can't force someone to want you by just trying harder. Real, healthy romantic relationships happen when 2 complete individuals choose to share their lives together, not when one person tries to fill a void with someone else's attention. And if that's something you're still struggling with, you should watch our video on the episode where Finn finds love again. And I just want to take the time to thank everyone for liking, subscribing, and joining us on this journey.
Napping?